My grandpa was a strange man, no doubt about it. You'd never guess he was wealthy if you saw how he lived. He had this modest little house on a quarter-acre lot, drove a practical car, and kept things simple inside, nothing fancy. If you passed his place, you'd think some retired guy was just living out his last years quietly, and honestly, you wouldn't be wrong. But where Grandpa showed his wealth was in how he gave. The man loved to give. Christmas. He gave the best presents. Halloween. He handed out candy so good it was like trick-or-treating at a candy store. He donated to charities and just loved making people happy. Anytime someone asked how he could afford to be so generous, he'd just give this sly wink and say, "I've got my ways." Not even Grandma, his wife of 50 years, knew where all his money came from. So, when he passed, everyone was curious about who'd inherit his mysterious fortune. My cousins loved Grandpa, every grandkid did, but the bond he and I shared was different. My dad skipped out before I was even born, off chasing some milk and cigarettes, as the saying goes, and Grandma and Grandpa helped my mom raise me while she worked. I spent countless afternoons watching TV with Grandpa, strolling around the neighborhood, and getting ice cream at this little shop down the street. Grandpa always had a way of making the simple things feel special. "Appreciate the little things," he'd say, showing me this strange brass door knocker he always carried in his pocket. I found this when I was a kid, digging through a landfill looking for bottles to sell. It's my lucky charm, and it changed my life forever. The door knocker was incredible, this brass hand clutching an apple, crafted in such exquisite detail it seemed impossible. Each finger had distinct fingernails, the apple had a stem and tiny leaves, and even the knuckles had wrinkles. As a kid, I couldn't believe Grandpa found something so intricate in a dump, but he carried it everywhere, and he swore it brought him luck. The funeral was beautiful, full of heartfelt memories and kind words about Grandpa. Afterward, my cousins and I were called to the lawyer's office for the will reading. Grandpa's generosity didn't end in life. My cousins each got a trust fund that they'd have access to on their 30th birthdays, plus a little allowance until then. And me? Grandpa left me his house. Honestly, I was thrilled. My mom had recently remarried, and while her new husband, Mike, was a good guy, I didn't want to cramp their new life together. Grandpa's house was perfect for me, a college student with no plans to marry anytime soon. It was close enough to campus to be practical. But then the lawyer handed me something else. "Your grandfather was very clear that this should go to you," he said, passing me Grandpa's lucky brass door knocker. I smiled, knowing exactly where I'd put it. I figured I'd hang it up somewhere in the house and make a little memorial area for Grandpa. It felt like the right thing to do. I moved in that same day, loading up my car and saying goodbye to Mom and Mike. The house felt oddly quiet without Grandpa there, but I was determined to make it my own. Over the next few days, I rearranged things. I hung my flat-screen TV on the wall, moved Grandpa's favorite chair to a better spot, and put my books on his old shelves. I donated most of his clothes and belongings to a charity he loved, and the folks there recognized his name immediately. Grandpa had been a regular donor, always buying and giving back, and they were grateful. For days after the funeral, I noticed the brass door knocker sitting on the kitchen counter, right where I'd left it. I'd planned to hang it, and now seemed as good a time as any. I set up a small memorial area in the living room. I hung the knocker on the wall and placed some candles, a picture of Grandpa, his old wallet, a tin of Altoids, and the pocket watch he always wore on a little shelf beneath it. It looked just right. Standing back, I couldn't help but think Grandpa would have liked it too. That night, though, something strange happened. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard this loud thump from the living room. I froze for a second, taking out my earbuds to listen. Maybe something had fallen over, or someone was knocking on the door. But there was nothing. Shrugging it off, I went to put my earbuds back in, when I heard it again. 3 deep, deliberate knocks echoed from the living room. I got up, my heart pounding a little, and went to check the front door. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing. The porch was empty, and there were no bushes or trees for anyone to hide behind. Whoever, or whatever, was knocking would have had to vanish into thin air. I stepped outside to look around, but the yard was completely still. Shaking my head, I went back inside and started toward my bedroom. That's when I heard it again. 3 slow, heavy knocks, and then silence. 3 heavy booms came from the living room, followed by an unsettling silence. I sat up in bed, heart thudding in my chest. Who could be knocking at this hour? I slid out from under the covers, the cool floorboards creaking beneath my feet, and cautiously made my way to the front door. Peeking through the peephole, I saw nothing. The porch was empty, the yard still. Grandpa's house didn't have any bushes to hide behind, and the streetlight cast a wide enough glow that anyone trying to sneak away would have been caught in its beam. I opened the door, just to be sure. The cold night air greeted me, but no prankster, no neighbors, no one. Whoever, or whatever, had knocked would have had to vanish like smoke. I lingered on the threshold for a moment, peering into the dark, before shutting the door and locking it tight. As I headed back to bed, I'd almost convinced myself I was imagining things. But just as I reached the hallway, the sound came again. 3 deliberate, heavy knocks. Then silence. I froze mid-step, staring back toward the living room. The knocks hadn't come from the door this time, I would have heard the vibration through the frame. No, they came from somewhere inside the house. My eyes scanned the dimly lit room, expecting to see something, or someone, standing in the shadows. I checked the windows, thinking maybe a bird or some animal had caused the sound, but everything was still. I finally shook my head and muttered to myself, "You're tired. You're hearing things." With that, I forced myself back to bed, deciding I'd figure it out in the morning. But it wasn't the last time. Over the weekend, the knocking continued. It would happen at random, always 1, 2, or 3 knocks, then a pause, then the same pattern repeated before stopping entirely. Each time, I tried to pinpoint the source. Pipes? The walls? I even considered the possibility of a prankster, though the sheer randomness of it made that seem unlikely. By Monday, I was so on edge I'd started jumping at small noises, my nerves fraying with every unexplained knock. That's when it happened right in front of me. I was rummaging through Grandpa's desk when I found a photograph of him and Grandma on their wedding day. It was tucked away in the back of a drawer, hidden beneath old receipts and faded envelopes. The photo was beautiful, her smiling in a vintage dress, him looking proud in his suit. I figured it would look perfect on the little memorial shelf I'd made. As I placed the picture beside Grandpa's pocket watch, the brass door knocker rattled on the wall. I spun around, heart leaping into my throat. The knocker moved again, striking the wall with 3 deliberate thuds, thump, thump, thump. Then, silence. I stepped back, my skin prickling with unease. It sat there, still as ever, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, or waiting for something. I reached up, hesitated for a moment, and then lifted it from the wall. Turning it over in my hands, I searched for some kind of mechanism. Was there a spring? A motor? Anything that might explain what I'd just seen? Nothing. It was just solid brass. Heavy, cold, and completely lifeless. It happened twice more that day, each time leaving me more shaken than before. The second time, I tried to catch it in the act, staring at it as if daring it to move. But it didn't budge until I looked away. By the third time, curiosity had overpowered fear, and I decided to dig deeper. I went back to Grandpa's desk, rifling through drawers and papers in search of answers. That's when I found it, a single sheet of notebook paper tucked inside one of Grandpa's old ledger books. It was addressed to me, and my breath caught as I recognized his familiar, cramped handwriting. The letter wasn't sealed, which was unusual for Grandpa. He was meticulous about little things like that. I sat down, my hands trembling slightly, and began to read. I hope you're settling into the house and that you're reading this at the right time. I thought about leaving it with Wilson to give to you, but I wanted you to find it naturally. Besides, Wilson's a good man, but if he read this, I doubt he'd give you the knocker. Greed does strange things to people, even honest ones. By now, you've noticed that the door knocker has a mind of its own. You probably wouldn't believe me if I told you how I discovered its power. It was a complete accident. But I swear to you, what I'm about to say is true. The door knocker doesn't just sit there collecting dust. It opens doors. Real doors, to other places. If you place it on a door and wait for the knocks, then open the door, you can step through to somewhere else. There are 3 destinations, and each one can change your life. But be careful. One knock opens the treasury. It's a room filled with treasures, coins, jewels, gold, you name it. I've never seen anything guarding it, but I've always been careful not to take more than I need. Greed has consequences. 2 knocks lead to the library. It's a vast room filled with bookshelves that seem to stretch forever. Time stands still there, so you can spend hours, even days, learning. It's where I gained most of my knowledge, even about things that haven't happened yet. 3 knocks. 3 knocks open the void. It's a darkness so absolute I've never dared to enter. Anything you put inside disappears forever. No ground, no walls, no light, just endless black. I've used it as a way to dispose of trash over the years. I'm ashamed to admit I even hid your dog there, the one I told you had run away. He died suddenly when you were young, and I didn't want you to see him that way. I'm sorry I never told you, but I didn't think you'd remember. The letter ended there. I set it down, my head spinning, staring at the knocker with a mix of fear and fascination. The thought hit me like a jolt of electricity. Could it really do what Grandpa said? The knocking patterns were never consistent, but they were always there, like an eerie rhythm woven into my days. The 3 knocks, ominous and heavy, typically came in the evening or late afternoon. A single knock, softer but insistent, would echo through the house in the mornings or just before noon. And the 2 knocks, those felt unpredictable, striking at odd hours as if to catch me off guard. The letter's warning echoed in my mind, while you're inside, don't let the door close. Grandpa's words haunted me, especially the part about being trapped. He'd mentioned being stuck in the library for a long time, only escaping because Uncle stumbled across the door and opened it. The thought of being caught in some timeless limbo sent a shiver down my spine. Time might stand still in those strange places, but pain, Grandpa had said, would remain very real. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about what the knocker could do. The possibilities seemed endless, even dangerous. Grandpa's fortune, his mysterious knowledge, it all made sense now. The knocker was mine, he'd said, but his final warning lingered: money breeds difficulty. The note didn't sound like a rambling confession from a senile old man. Grandpa had been sharp as a tack, even in his final years. No, this wasn't madness. I'd seen the knocker move. I'd felt its weight, its silent potential. There was only one way to know for sure. I decided to test it. I removed the knocker from its spot on the wall and attached it to the closet door in the living room. It looked ridiculous, a shiny brass door knocker on a plain closet door crammed with old coats and board games. I felt foolish even considering the possibility that Grandpa's tale might be true, but curiosity burned brighter than my skepticism. Hours passed, and nothing happened. I'd almost given up when it finally came. 2 loud knocks, measured and deliberate, rang from the closet door. I froze. My heart pounded, a mixture of fear and anticipation. Grandpa's letter had said I only had 10 seconds. 10 seconds to act. Adrenaline surged as I jumped up from the couch and darted for the door. I grabbed the handle, expecting nothing but the familiar sight of musty coats and stacked cardboard boxes. Yet as I flung the door open, my breath caught in my throat. The closet was gone. In its place was the library Grandpa had described, a space so vast and surreal that it made my living room feel like a dollhouse in comparison. Towering bookshelves stretched to heights that defied reason, their tops disappearing into an impossible ceiling bathed in warm sunlight. Massive ladders on wheels lined the shelves, their polished rungs glinting in the glow. The room was quiet, yet alive, filled with the faint whispers of turning pages and the scent of aged paper. A grand staircase spiraled upward, hinting at even more levels of knowledge beyond sight. I stepped inside, awestruck. I'd always loved books, but this was something else entirely. It was like every library in the world had been condensed into a single, perfect place. Each shelf seemed to whisper promises of discovery, books on languages, architecture, history, science. I spotted tomes that looked ancient, their spines weathered, alongside others that seemed impossibly futuristic. Grandpa's warning tugged at the edge of my mind: don't let the door close. I hurriedly grabbed a small end table and wedged it against the doorframe, ensuring it stayed open. Only then did I allow myself to wander, my fingers brushing against leather-bound covers as I marveled at the sheer volume of knowledge surrounding me. Hours slipped by like minutes. I lost myself in the books, flipping through pages that revealed secrets of the world and beyond. As an architecture student, the library was a treasure trove. Books on Gothic cathedrals, ancient temples, and futuristic designs filled entire sections. I felt like I could learn everything here, master any subject, unlock any mystery. Eventually, exhaustion set in. My eyes grew heavy, and the initial excitement faded into a drowsy haze. I placed the last book on a table, reluctantly stepping back to the door. It was tempting to stay, but I knew better. Grandpa's warnings weren't to be taken lightly. As I pulled the end table away and let the door close behind me, I whispered, "It's real." The next few days were a blur of testing and discovery. The knock patterns proved Grandpa's notes correct. The following morning, a single knock opened the treasury. The sight was breathtaking. A cavernous space brimming with wealth beyond imagination, gold bars stacked like bricks, coins and gems spilling across the floor, and artifacts that seemed ancient yet untouched by time. I stepped cautiously inside, heeding Grandpa's advice not to take too much. My hand trembled as I grabbed a stack of crisp $100 bills. I emerged moments later, richer by a couple $1,000s. Then came the void. When 3 knocks echoed from the door late one night, I hesitated before answering. Grandpa's description had been chilling, and stepping into the unknown felt reckless. Still, I needed to see it for myself. The door opened to an abyss, a blackness so absolute it seemed to swallow the light from the living room behind me. The void was silent and suffocating, an endless nothingness that seemed alive in its emptiness. I quickly tossed in a garbage bag I'd prepared and slammed the door shut, my heart pounding. For a while, everything was perfect. I had all the money I needed, knowledge at my fingertips, and a convenient way to dispose of trash. I kept the door's secrets to myself, careful not to draw attention. Life was good. But then, the knocks changed. At first, it was subtle, soft taps that came at odd times, barely noticeable. Shadows began to flicker beneath the door, faint and fleeting, like whispers in the dark. I started watching the door more closely, my unease growing with each passing day. The strange knocks became more frequent, more insistent. Lights, strange, shifting lights, would seep out from under the door, casting eerie patterns on the floor. I avoided the knocker as much as I could, but the unease followed me everywhere. Then, one night, as I sat on the couch staring at the door, something knocked back. The sound wasn't like the others. It was heavier, deeper, almost deliberate. I froze, the room suddenly feeling too small, too quiet. Whatever was on the other side wasn't just knocking. It was waiting. I was brushing my teeth when I heard it, 3 solid knocks, each one echoing through the quiet house like a distant thunderclap. The sound jolted me, and I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 11, later than usual for the knocks to come. Toothbrush still in my mouth, I leaned out of the bathroom to glance at the door. The hallway was dim, the soft glow from the living room lamp casting long shadows on the walls. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. But then I heard it again. This time, it wasn't the knocker. I stepped cautiously into the hallway, my heart beating faster. A strange light began to seep from the cracks around the door, flickering and pulsing like an erratic heartbeat. It wasn't the warm glow of sunlight from the library or the dim gold of the treasury. This light was unnatural, cold and sharp, shifting in hues of green and purple, like something alive. The knocks continued, soft at first, hesitant, like someone, or something, was testing the door. I backed away instinctively, planning to retreat to my room, when a sudden boom rattled the door in its frame. I froze. Another crash followed, and then another. Whatever was on the other side was slamming into the door with relentless force. The light flared brighter, spilling into the room like liquid fire, and I stumbled backward, falling hard onto the floor. The banging didn't stop. The door groaned under the weight of each impact, its wooden frame creaking ominously. My breath came in shallow gasps as I scrambled to my feet, watching in horror as a crack began to splinter along the edge of the door. And then I saw it. A hand, or rather, something like a hand, burst through the cracked wood. It was long, unnaturally long, and covered in gleaming purple scales that shimmered in the eerie light. Razor-sharp claws tipped each finger, and the limb writhed and flailed, searching for something to grab. The sounds that accompanied it were worse than anything I'd ever heard. It was a cacophony of screeches, flapping wings, and guttural cries, all pitched so high and sharp it made my ears throb. I clapped my hands over them, wincing as the noise grew louder, more insistent. The arm thrashed violently, the claws gouging deep grooves into the doorframe. It was searching for the knob, I realized with dawning horror. If it found it, if it managed to open the door. I didn't want to think about what might happen. But then, by some twisted stroke of luck, it found something else instead, the knocker. The claw brushed against it, and the knocker, which had only been loosely screwed into the door, clattered to the floor. What happened next was so sudden and jarring it left me disoriented. The moment the knocker hit the floor, the arm let out a piercing, unearthly scream, and the light vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. The screeching stopped. The banging stopped. The oppressive energy that had filled the house dissipated in an instant, leaving behind an eerie silence. I stayed frozen on the floor, my chest heaving, staring at the now quiet door. It looked battered, the wood cracked and splintered, but it held firm. For several long moments, I didn't move, too afraid that something might still be lurking on the other side. But then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic thump. I crept cautiously into the living room, my bare feet sticking to the floor where something dark and viscous had pooled. The air smelled faintly metallic, like burnt ozone and blood. Rounding the corner, I saw what was making the noise. It was the arm. The grotesque limb lay on the floor, twitching and oozing black fluid that shimmered like oil. It flopped weakly, the claws scratching uselessly against the hardwood, until, finally, it went still. I stood there, staring at it, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this thing? It was real, tangible proof of something far beyond my understanding. And worse, it was proof that whatever lived beyond that door wasn't content to stay there. I grabbed a towel from the kitchen and wrapped the arm in it, trying not to gag as the oily substance seeped through the fabric. My hands shook as I carried it to the trash, shoving it into a heavy-duty garbage bag. I didn't dare open the door to the void to dispose of it. I wasn't ready to face that place again, not tonight. The knocker now sat on the coffee table, innocent and unassuming. It looked ordinary, like any antique you might find at a flea market, yet I knew better. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand, and carried it to my bedroom. I didn't want to leave it out in the open, not after what had just happened. I slid it into the drawer of my bedside table, but even there, it didn't feel safe. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I could swear I heard it bumping against the wood, as if impatient to be hung again. The money will run out eventually, I know that. And my curiosity, it's a fire that refuses to burn out. The library calls to me, with its infinite shelves and endless knowledge. The treasury whispers promises of wealth beyond imagination. Even the void, as terrifying as it is, holds a strange allure. But for now, I'll resist. For now, the knocker will stay locked away. Because some doors should stay closed. My inheritance had strange rules, indeed.